All right, good evening, everyone. Before we even begin, I'm hoping that all of you have already turned off your cell phones, but if you have not, if you would please do so, I'd appreciate it. Good evening and welcome to the forum on how to run for office. Some facts that you may not be aware of, but that we were able to cull is, first of all, there are over 500,000 elected offices in the United States. That's more than all employees of McDonald's throughout the world, just as a means of comparison. Incumbents win 90% of the time. However, at one time, incumbents were first-time candidates. Nationwide, in the 2016 elections, more than 40% of state legislative races were uncontested. And here in Massachusetts, the number of uncontested legislative races was over 70%. Hence, this is why the Plymouth Area League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan organization whose focus is on education and voter service, has put together the program for this evening. Our emphasis tonight is on the offices that actually get things done: state legislators, town boards, and school committees. For if we care about the future of our country, state, and community, we need candidates to run, and that candidate could be you. Our first speaker this evening is Larry Pizer, who will speak about the legal nuts and bolts of running for public office. Larry is a Massachusetts native. He grew up in Winthrop, Massachusetts. Larry earned a BA in history from Brown University, followed by a master's in history from the University of Iowa. One of the interesting facts about Larry that I learned is that while he was director of Adams County, Nebraska Historical Society, he produced a 6-part TV series on the history of the Great Plains. His public service here has included town clerk of Plymouth for 25 plus years, 2 years as president of the legislative committee, 2 years as president of the Mass Town Clerks Association and chairperson of the Mass Town Clerks Association Legislative Committee for 6 years. And in that capacity, he was instrumental in shepherding a bill through the state legislature permitting electronic databases for vital records. So without further introduction, Larry, if you would, please.
Thank you. This town nomination paper, a very easy document to navigate. And before I even talk about navigating the document, your town clerk is your friend, whether you're from Plymouth or from any other town in Massachusetts. Fill out the document the best you can, and then ask the clerk, and then ask the clerk, and then ask the clerk. You're going to make sure that any problems you have won't be that you filled out the document incorrectly. In fact, ask the clerk first and then fill out the document. A couple of things that you're going to want to know. You're going to be on the ballot with your name as you are registered to vote. If you don't like the way your name appears as you're registered to vote, change it. No problem with that at all. It can be done as you're taking out papers. Technically, can even be done after you take out papers. And our state senator, for example, decided that Viriato was kind of a mouthful. And just before he started running for office, he changed his name on his voter registration to Vinny. And that's how he appears on the ballot now. On the document, there's a place that says, I accept the nomination. If you're running for town office, we shackle you to the town clerk's office until you sign that. That's required. You do have to sign that. Pretty technical stuff, but someone else can't put you on the ballot. You have to put yourself on the ballot. If you want one of these nomination papers, come to the town clerk's office or sign a letter asking another person to get the nomination papers for you, but we do need to see your signature on the papers. If you've decided to run for state office, there are various papers for particular state offices. Not every town clerk's office has state nomination papers. For the past probably 15 years, Plymouth has been one of the offices around the state supplied with state nomination papers. They're definitely available at the Secretary of the Commonwealth's Elections Division office at 1 Ashburton Place in Boston. But you're certainly welcome to come to our office. The only difference with this is they're going to ask you what district you're running for. So if you're going to be running for state legislature, for example, Mr. Muratori is 1st Plymouth, Mr. Coulter is 12th Plymouth, and strangely enough, the Precinct 9 is part of 4th Barnstable. They don't combine the way they did in the Senate, which was the Plymouth and Barnstable district. Make sure you know the name of the district. That can be a problem if you're filling out the papers and that sort of thing is incorrect. Also, there is an enrollment certificate on every state nomination paper. It basically says if you're running for partisan office, we certify that candidate's name is a registered voter at candidate's address and has been enrolled in the whatever party for 90 days prior to the last filing, etc. And indeed, the clerk does check on that sort of thing and make sure that it's true. It's also possible to run without enrollment in a party, different document. But you have to make sure that you are providing at least one of these sheets when you are bringing that paper to where it ends up belonging. The magic of getting signatures. State law says that address must be precisely as registered. And we read precisely exactly what it says. If a person lives on Sandwich Road and they put Sandwich, that's not going to be good enough. If a person lives, and I know this sounds like we're sticklers, the name of Lund's Way has an apostrophe in it. Make sure that all of these things are exactly as registered. The name of the person signing your document, signing as one of the people, the registered voters, saying that you should be put on the ballot, that is approximately as registered. So if we read L. Pizer, Larry Pizer, even though I am registered as Lawrence R. Pizer, those would actually be correct. In fact, we go out of our way as far as names are concerned. If there was one person living in my household and it said Pizer, that would be good enough. As long as you're able to identify from this precise address who the person is. If you're out gathering signatures, we recommend that despite the complete failure of penmanship in the United States, you encourage people to have some semblance of, especially with the address, but even with their name. We would rather see someone print their name as their name. We're not the police of signatures. We work very hard with the address part of the matter, but give us a chance to put the person's name. We would rather approve a signature under any of the circumstances. For reasons that are probably lost in the mists of time, it has ward and precinct at the end of the document. We don't use that. Someone said to me that perhaps it was to identify which person it is. It makes no sense to me, because if you live at 27 Chatham Road, there's only one of those in Plymouth, as with all the addresses in Plymouth. So don't bother people if you're gathering signatures to have them put that on. The state gets excited, and people get excited with the state. There's something called stray marks that could invalidate a nomination paper. The people who are talking about it exaggerate. It's hardly ever the case, and it's never the case with town nomination papers. Very annoying for the clerk's office when people come in with one signature on 400 pages as opposed to 20 times 25 or 20 pages. The people at the elections division of the Secretary of the Commonwealth are there to make it work for you. That's where you're going to bring your state nomination papers. If you have any questions of them, get there early. People who bring papers in on the last day are taking a terrible chance. Bring the papers there. If they're going to refuse some of your papers, you'll have a chance. You show it to them and say, is this okay? They say no, and you at least have a chance to come back in with more papers. Technically, the process for both town and state papers is the papers are handed to the Board of Voting Registrars. The Board of Voting Registrars shows up about 4 or 5 times a year, and therefore they're not the actual people. They have given their responsibility to my staff in the office. So you can't even see it when it's a town paper, as the Board of Voting Registrars hands it to the town clerk. It's a technical process. What you can see when you're running for state office is the Board of Voting Registrars within the town clerk's office fills these out, and then you bring these papers that have been where the signatures have been verified to the Secretary of the Commonwealth. We were talking about incumbents and how to become one. It is the case frequently that a person running for office wins not necessarily on the first time that person runs for office. And that's worth knowing. If you're a serious candidate, you get your name out there, and the second time that you're there, you've already had a head start because people know who you are and what you stand for. And even it is the case that for town meeting member in Plymouth, although 3 people win in each precinct, if there's a resignation during the year, the next person on the list is given the position of town meeting member for the rest of the year. So you can even lose and win if you actually participate. And participating is not all that difficult, and we are there to make it so. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, for that informative presentation to get us started. Our next speaker is Michelle Badger, who is a member of the Plymouth School Committee. Michelle is a native Plymouthian. She graduated from Plymouth South High School in 2002. And after graduation, she went to Sweetbriar College, graduating from there with a degree in History and International Affairs, while also starring for 4 years on the college's field hockey team. After graduation, Michelle worked for the Sweetbriar College's annual fund. And in 2010, after 2 years of study, Michelle graduated from Suffolk University with a dual master's degree in political science and public administration. Michelle is currently employed at Mass Maritime Academy in their advancement office. And in her spare time, in 2011, she ran for school committee and is currently in her 7th year on the committee, serving 5 of those years as vice chairperson. So she is going to share her experiences in running for school committee. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who came out tonight and for the League of Women Voters for having me. We were asked to tell you a little bit about our why, our how, and our experiences so far. I feel like my why kind of takes me back to third grade, going and voting with my parents and the excitement. And I'm not sure if it starts because of the old way we used to vote with the curtain and the lever, but it just was magical to me, and I would go and vote with my parents anytime we could vote. And it really kind of sparked my interest in politics in third grade when we started to learn about our candidates and who they were. And I had conversations with my neighbors about policies at obviously an 8-year-old level, but about what education policy and healthcare and things like that, trying to pick my candidate so that I could convince my parents who they should vote for. I, to the chagrin of my neighbor, picked Clinton. He was very upset. But, you know, over the years, we continued to have our political dialogue, and he never changed me, and I never changed him. But it was really formative for me. When I went to college in Virginia, I joined their college Democrats and got involved with the SGA and all that stuff, and really tried to understand the politics of Virginia, but I don't know if that is possible from someone from Massachusetts. The foothills of Virginia, the foothills of the Blue Ridge are their own special world. And so after 2 years of studying and trying to figure it out and living there, I decided that Massachusetts was a better place for me and moved back to Plymouth and started to get involved more locally in state and local politics, volunteering and working on campaigns like Senator Murray's campaign, and just getting involved. Because as was stated by Larry, I think just being involved is important. It doesn't matter what you do or at what level you do it at, if it's elected or unelected, just being involved and having your voice heard is really important. And so in 2011, I decided to run for school committee because I had seen, I've always been passionate about education, whether or not it's access to education and quality of education for all. I have been involved in higher education since I graduated from college. I've either been a fundraiser or events person, and so I've had a lot of experiences with college students. And when I looked at the makeup of that school committee, and we had 2 open seats, I noticed that there wasn't anybody who had that after. What do those students need to go into college? How do you get them prepared for that? And so I had seen my students come to me, and they wanted me to read papers. When I say my students, they worked for me. I ran a phone-a-thon. I had like 60 kids who worked for me at this one school. And they would ask me to read their papers and ask me all kinds of crazy technology questions that, in my perspective, they should have known. The papers, they should have been better writers. And it should be noted, I never had a student from Plymouth, so this is not a reflection on our students or our school. But to me, it kind of was education as a whole. I had kids from the South Shore and the North Shore and Western Mass and all over the country. And I was very perplexed sometimes when they would come to me. And so to me, when the 2 open seats came, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a chance. I'm going to try to run. And like was said, and I think Larry said it, just getting your name out there. I thought, I had no chance of winning, that I was a girl from South Plymouth who wasn't really involved too much when I was younger. And so I thought, I'll put my name out there. If I win, I win. If not, it takes a lot of, I think, courage for anybody at any level to run. And so I did it. I wanted to give it a try. So I decided to run to give back to Plymouth, and also to give what I thought was my knowledge and what I could share with the Plymouth schools and the town of Plymouth. So my how? Well, as I said, I saw there were 2 open seats, and I was like, all right, let's take these papers out. I talked to some people. I said, what do you think? Will you be my volunteers? Will you be my treasurer? Will you be my chairperson for my committee? I don't think it was the most organized or probably the perfect way to do it, but I got my friends, and they said that they would be available on, I think it was May 14th, and they would hold signs for me, and they would be there at the dump with me. They would do what they needed to do to help me get some votes. So I said, all right, let's do this. Grab my papers. And the first step that I did after I grabbed my papers was to reach out to Dr. Maestas and the other school committee members. I think that was really important and really helpful for me because, I saw the school from the outside and not what was going on the inside. I have no children. I didn't have any children. I had some cousins who lived in town, but that was about as close as I got to the current operation of the Plymouth schools. So when I met with them, I asked at least 4 questions from what I can remember. I asked what they were surprised about when they joined the school committee, just so that I had some sort of idea. You see what you see, but you do not see it all. 2 of the, what was your favorite part about being a committee member? What surprised you, as I said? What their schedule looked like. Because I think what your schedule looks like, anybody on this committee or this panel will tell you, is a little bit more surprising than you would have thought. I think I knew I was going to get into a lot of subcommittees, and I knew I was going to have a lot of things to do, but at certain times of year, it is a lot. It's meaningful, and I enjoy it, but it is a lot. Any suggestions that they would have for me, other people I should meet with, those are kind of the questions I started with. And all of these conversations really gave me an insight into the schools. What it helped me kind of formulate a little bit better what and why I had decided to run, and exactly what I wanted to do. And after reaching out to and meeting with many members, I also called every town meeting member and left a voicemail if they had a voicemail. If they didn't, I tried a couple times, but it was I thought I had this grand idea. I'm gonna talk with all these people. They're gonna tell me what their thoughts are, and I think maybe I talked to one person from every precinct if I was lucky. Sometimes they were really short. Sometimes they just were like, okay, that's great, thank you, and they moved along. But more practice that you get explaining why you're doing what you're doing and finding out what other people think, I think is really important. As I mentioned before, I stood at all of our dumps on Saturdays and Sundays and met with people near the recycling when you used to be able to meet with people by the recycling before we had curb pickup and everybody did that. And at grocery stores, I literally had these homemade little pieces of paper that I said, who I was, what I was a little bit about my background and what I was interested in doing, and just handed them out. They weren't the nicest looking things. I printed on my home printer, but I have student loans and I couldn't afford to put a lot out there. So that was kind of how I did it. I raised a little bit of money, but not a ton, and I thought it was more important that I focus on getting out there and meeting people than to fundraise at that point. Since I am a professional fundraiser, that sounds really funny. But I also went to all kinds of meetings, any meeting I was invited to, any home I was invited into, anybody else who was running that was having a coffee, and they said, why don't you just come along? I did, and talked to people and let them know who I was. And I had a kickoff and introduced myself to people in the community, invited them in, and we had a few new people, but mostly people, parents and friends and everybody else that I already kind of knew. The experience of running for me was, I think, overall really positive. I did have a couple people who were like, oh, aren't you cute running? I think when you see a young female candidate, you sometimes get that reaction, unfortunately. I know I had my dad's member of the Seaside Club, and he was sitting there one day just talking to some guys, and this guy came right up to him and was like, your daughter stands no chance of winning. She should just probably stop. Nobody knows who she is. And this was only a couple weeks after. And my dad told me, and I was like, people, it doesn't matter. I'm going to just keep trying. And like I said, get my name out there. Try again. But after a while, and my dad never told me, but he came up to him like 2 weeks before, and he was like, okay, your daughter might win. She might have this. It'll be okay. So I don't think he told me. I'm not sure if it was because he figured it was making me, angry or work harder. But he never told me. And after, he was like, oh, the guys really were like, you can win. So, but I think mostly positive. After I won, I also did a program called the Merge, which is through the Massachusetts Democratic Women in Massachusetts. And so since I've run, I've learned a lot of skills. It's like a 12 Saturdays or something course. It's over a course of like 6 months. But I've really enjoyed being on the school committee. I think the things that you learn as an elected official is sometimes the things that you don't think there'll be a lot of conversation on. Surprisingly, there's a ton of conversation. It really brings people out. And just to get the opportunity to continue to learn more about, I know I'm on the Pilgrim Area Collaborative, so I've learned a ton about special education students, and even in grad school, I did lots of early education research, and so it's been a lot of fun to get to learn a lot more about that. I've had opportunities to travel to Japan and England, and I did the Dream Ride with Dr. Maestas, which was a lot of fun, but a lot of work. And I think we're just really lucky to have the district that we have, and the passionate teachers and committee members and community members who are just give everything they have to the students. So, but thank you again for being here tonight and for the League of Women Voters.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Our next speaker is Sheila Joyce. Sheila has lived in Massachusetts all of her life and in Plymouth since 2003. She is a 1979 graduate of Suffolk University with a BA in Business Management and an MA in Business Administration in 1980. Her 38-year business career has been in healthcare information technology in various roles, currently as Director of Information Systems and Medical Records at MIT. Both Sheila and her husband, Kevin, have been very involved in Plymouth since they moved here. Kevin has been a town meeting member for 13 years, as well as a member of the town's cable committee and chair of the Disabilities Commission. Sheila was elected a member of the Plymouth's Board of Selectmen in 2016, and prior to that, she was a member of the town's Advisory and Finance Committee, as well as second vice chair. Prior to her service with FinCom, Sheila was a town meeting member from multiple precincts in Plymouth. Sheila.
Thank you, Alice, and thanks for everybody for coming out tonight. First, I want to extend my thanks to the League for inviting me to be part of tonight's program. And as Michelle said, we had a couple of questions posed to us in terms of trying to cover our information. So first, I wanted to share with you why I decided to run for the Board of Selectmen. And as Larry said, sometimes the first time doesn't stick. I ran the first time when Matt Moratori had gotten elected to the House of Representatives, when Senator Murray had stepped down and Vinnie DiMacedo took his spot. So I lost that first year, and I decided to run the following year. So before I share with you my reasons as to why I wanted to run, I wanted to convey my thanks and my respect to every selectman who served in the town of Plymouth, whether it's now or in the past. It's, as Michelle said, it's not an easy job. Did I have expectations of what it would be? Yes and no. But as Alice said, I've lived in the town of Plymouth since 2003, being a town meeting member for multiple terms and being a member of the town's Advisory and Finance Committee. I felt strongly that the Board of Selectmen needed some new energy. I thought the board could use some more diversity. As we know, that it was all males before I got elected for a couple of years. I also think it needed different perspectives and additional perspectives as to how to address the town's challenges and try to firm up some of the priorities. I thought I could help the board operate more effectively for all the residents and the businesses in town. In 2016, everybody on the board lived in the downtown area or in North Plymouth. I saw that as kind of a little misbalance. The growth in the population in the town of Plymouth is growing south of Exit 5. It's not growing in the denser parts because there is not a lot of room. So I thought that would be another reason in terms of diversity. And we know Plymouth is a big town. It's the biggest town in the state of Massachusetts. And, you know, different parts of town bring different perspectives and different ideas to the board. As Alice said, my whole professional career has been in the business and finance world. On a daily basis, I need to balance budgets, make decisions, make priorities, adjust my priorities. I felt as though the selectmen needed to have some more help get some importance on finances and budgets. I felt as though I could help raise the fiscal awareness of the board. I, as well as many others in Plymouth, were getting increasingly alarmed by the tax rate. In 2007, the rate was $9.71 per thousand. In 2016, the rate was $16.58 per thousand. That was an increase of 67%, which to me was very scary, even though my husband and I were both working, and I think it's scary to many others in town. I was pretty certain that the large majority of people's incomes had not increased by 2/3 in the course of 9 years. In the winter of 2015, 2016, we know what happened there. Just before Christmas and after Christmas, we had the disaster of multiple breaks in the waste treatment system. The majority of the board lived on the sewer system. I was distressed, as well as many others, to hear that the town might have been remiss in making sure that there wasn't the best oversight in terms of management of that town sewer system. Less than 20% of the town lives on the town sewer system or businesses, and I felt as though it was important that the other 80% of the town's residents and businesses had a voice at the table regarding the repairs of the system and how to finance fairly the cost of those repairs. One of the other questions that the league had shared with us, and Larry did a great job going over it, and in terms of what's the process, how do you run for office? As Larry showed us, nomination papers need to be pulled. My husband came down in town hall to pull them because I work in Boston every day and I can't get here during the day. You have to have a certain amount of signatures, whether you're a new candidate or whether you're running for the same office again. And there are multiple debates, multiple forums that are sponsored by various organizations in town to kind of get the word out. When I ran, there were debates sponsored by PAC TV, the League of Women Voters. There were various town union groups that sponsored debates, and WATD in their office that we were all sitting on top of each other was had a debate. That was a fun night. The OCM newspaper obviously gets involved in the election too and asks the candidates for different opinions and different ideas. Michelle referenced it a little. It definitely costs money to run an election. It's a hard job to ask people for money. It's an uncomfortable situation, and I think each candidate needs to determine what their approach will be. What do they think is the best way to get their message out there, and how is the best way to run a successful campaign? Some people feel comfortable, hey, I'm going to have a coffee, meet the candidate, come over to my house on Sunday afternoon. Some people think that's a very good way of getting your word out and getting your face out there. Michelle mentioned that she had gone to some of those. Some like to communicate via Facebook. Some think spending a lot of money is the end-all and the be-all, and they spend a lot of money on advertising. They spend a lot of money on robocalls. I think it's safe to say that probably every candidate has a different opinion on what's the most effective way to get their message out to the voters. I utilized multiple different ways to get my message out. And historically, as we know that Plymouth, as well as other towns, don't have the best turnout for a local election. I think that's very unfortunate. One of my goals was to get more people engaged in local elections. And also, there's no magical wand, dust, or whatever to run a successful campaign. One of the other questions that we were asked to give some thought to is, are there any pluses or minuses that you wanted to share with everybody tonight in terms of running for a local office? And, you know, you see these people every day. You see them in the supermarket, the church. I take the train into the city. I see people on the train. So I think one of the unique things that's, to me, an honor is how you can't get much more personal and you can't get much more involved by running in the town that you live in. You're representing the people that you live next door to or that you commute with. On the flip side, the negative, you might be voting on an issue that your neighbor might get mad at you about in terms of how you voted or the stand, or, you know, it's kind of an awkward situation in terms of, you know, hey, I want you to vote this way, and you might have a reason that you don't think that's the best way to spend your vote. How did I think about it? Was I worried that I was going to get some pushback? Not really. I felt very strongly that the town could benefit with some new energy and some ideas on how to make the town better for its 60,000 residents and employees. And as Michelle said, you put yourself out there. It's not the most comfortable situation in the world, but I felt as though it was important enough to do it. And one of the other reasons, after I lost the first year, and I kind of was like, okay, that's enough of that, I had gone to a couple of meetings, and just the dialogue going on between a couple of different committees, I was surprised the lack of communication and the lack of collaboration between a couple of committees that were talking. So I went home to my house that night, and I told my husband, I'm going to run again, because I just thought it was the wrong thing, that those town boards shouldn't be working together and talking about it more. So as a wrap-up, thanks again to the League for coming out tonight. Thanks to everybody who's in the audience. I'm honored to be a Plymouth Selectman, and I look forward to continuing working with everybody effectively in future years. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Our next speaker is Steve Trifletti. And when I asked Steve to send me a brief biography, he did just that, 3 sentences, which I will now share with you, explaining that he supplied the rest when he was talking about all of his experiences in running for office in Plymouth. Steve is also a native of Massachusetts. He attended school in Kingston, graduated from Silver Lake High School, Gettysburg College, and Boston College School of Law. He's been an attorney practicing in Plymouth for the past 40 years. He lives in Plymouth with his wife, Noelle, and they have 3 children. Steve.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and all of you who are attending this evening or watching on cable TV. As I thought about this particular presentation, I realized that for me, the path that I took was a very traditional path. So when we look at the national level and we have a president who did not have prior experience in government, for me it was quite the opposite, that as a child I was a scout and I learned that it was always important to be prepared. And when I first had an opportunity to participate in government as a candidate, it was as a high school student when I ran for student council in the 9th grade. And during my high school career, I served in various offices as president of the Honor Society, as an officer of student council, as class president, which still to this day helps me to network with people, planning class reunions. And I was also the president of my youth group in the church. And when I think about that, I learned a lot in those early years, and it was an opportunity to make mistakes without a lot of problems in my future life. I remember one time as a youth leader in my church, it's the Church of the Pilgrimage here in Plymouth in Town Square, and I was asked to get up and speak on a Sunday morning to tell about my summer conference camp experience. And I thought, well, I can do that, and it's a large group of people, and I don't really need to do anything to prepare for this. And so I get up, and as soon as I started to talk, I kind of forgot what it is that I wanted to say. And I got red, and I got kind of hot, and I was very embarrassed because I didn't even have a note card, which I always, to this day, always bring a note card with bullet points of what I want to talk about, because I've learned from that experience where I was somewhat embarrassed in the 11th grade that it is so important to be prepared when you're going to speak in public, because you never know what's going to happen that might distract you from what you're planning to say, and so it's always good to have some notes. So certainly in early years in school, I learned a lot, and also in my high school, I had the opportunity, they had an announcing staff, and so I had the opportunity to be an announcer for the entire school. And these seem like small things, but you know, for those of you here this evening or watching, if you talk to young people, and I always enjoy having a chance to talk to students, it's so important for them to take the opportunities in school and when they're in public groups to be able to speak at a young age, because that's how you get the experience for when you're an adult. When I was in college, the same type of thing. I was president of my class. I was on the student senate. And I got to, again, become a little more sophisticated in being not only a candidate, but also serving in office, because I got to learn parliamentary procedure. I got to learn that you have to be organized with packets of material or agendas. And it seems like small things, but once you run for an office and you're then elected, you may want to be reelected. And so in order to do that, you need to know how to do a good job. When I left college and came back to Plymouth, in my early years, I got involved in community organizations. And for those of you who are thinking about running or want to encourage someone, seems to me that that's a very good training ground for knowing how to then serve in a public office. So whether it be a service club like Rotary, or for me, a bar association, or the chamber, or my church, those were all very good opportunities for me, again, to hone my skill set, if you will, in order to be not only a candidate, but to serve in public office. I initially ran for town meeting when I was a young adult here in Plymouth. And in my precinct, and I see one of my fellow precinct members at that time, we would get together and caucus a little bit about how would you go about and do that. Well, in my first year in running for town meeting, I decided to knock on the door of everyone in my precinct. And people do that now, but at that time, I don't know that a lot of people were doing it in the early 80s. I did it. I was elected. I was the top vote getter, not only in my precinct, but in the town of Plymouth for town meeting members. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it was because I was the best candidate. I was a good candidate, but I think that extra effort of going and knocking on doors and listening to what people had to say made a difference in terms of being a candidate for town meeting. And I served on town meeting for a number of years, and then I had, we have 3 children, and at the time when they were first entering school, I thought to myself, I want to be involved in public education for my children. I ran for school committee again. It was a challenge running for my first townwide office, listening to some of the other candidates. I decided to go and work as hard as I could to be a candidate, to be elected. We organized in every precinct. We had precinct chairs. We did raise money in order to pay for signs and other costs of campaign. And we had people at the precinct polls on election day. We had standouts throughout the campaign. And as a candidate, I did try to take advantage of every opportunity. If there was an opportunity to write in the Old Colony, I would do that. If there were WATD or other opportunity to be involved in a forum, certainly take advantage of that. Not all candidates did that. And so, again, I also learned that it was important to try to communicate to the constituents that while issues are important, that it's often trying to explain how you would approach things, that you will do your homework, that you will listen, and you'll make a decision finally based on what you think is best for the town, so that not necessarily taking a stand on all the issues. It was interesting, when I first ran for school committee, I defeated the chair of the school committee, and again, I got the most votes, not only for school committee, but in the town of Plymouth, at a time when I was supporting an override to open Plymouth South High School. The override lost. I was supporting that, and yet I won as a candidate. And I learned that even though you had a position on issues, that maybe the most important thing was to try to convey your qualities as a candidate. I served for 1 term, and I congratulate Michelle and Sheila and all of the people that serve on multi-member boards that meet weekly or biweekly. It was grueling to be a school committee member and to not only attend all the meetings in the subcommittees, but all the school events. And it was a great experience, but I decided that for me at that time, we had a moderator who was appointing people to the Advisory and Finance Committee, and in my opinion, they were not neutral people. Many of them were avowed on record as being opposed to schools, opposed to Proposition 2.5, opposed to opening new schools. And for those reasons, and because I wanted my children and my fellow people in the town to get a fair shake when it came to education, I ran for moderator again against the incumbent. Again, I ran hard, I organized, I raised as much money as we could, and fortunately we were successful. And I've enjoyed being moderator for the past 25 years. We were asked what types of things might have happened that didn't go well. Well, after being elected moderator in 1994, I decided that what could I do at another level? And for me, it wasn't feasible to consider running for the legislature because I have a full-time job as a local attorney. But I thought a county commissioner would be an opportunity to go beyond Plymouth to be helpful. And so I actively campaigned in the 27 communities in the city of Brockton for over a year. I had the support of all of the town committees in the town's city of Brockton, and yet when the primary occurred, I lost, and I learned that what was also important was to understand the constituents, the demographics, the population, and I ran against someone who lived in Abington, a surrogate of Brockton, and in those days, Brockton had a lot more clout, and also the other candidate had an Irish surname, and in that particular election, people don't really know what county commissioners do. I don't know how many people in this room even know what a county commissioner does. So I didn't really appreciate that even if you were knowledgeable on the issues and you're a good candidate, you might not win. And I lost terribly in the Irish Riviera along Duxbury, Marshfield, Situate, and Hingham. So I wasn't elected, but it was a good lesson. And so I would say to you, if you're thinking about running or encouraging people, the way I did it years ago is not necessarily the way to do it now. I think that it's important to not only be involved with social media, and I would need help with that, but all types of media. And when I do things now, I do interviews on radio, I do shows on cable TV, I speak to the newspaper, because I think that, again, people get their news and their information from all different formats. I also encourage people to have business cards, because when I'm out in the community and I'm talking to people, and before this I left a Chamber of Commerce after hours, the best way to exchange information is to exchange cards. And as a candidate, I would always have my name, my phone number, now it would be my email address, ways in which people can contact me and I can contact them. So if you're going to run for a campaign, I think, as we say in many networking groups, you don't sit, you network, you get out there. You got to be active, you got to attend groups and go beyond your comfort areas. So, if your comfort area is the League of Women Voters, go to a chamber group or go to a Rotary Club, whatever it might be that maybe is unfamiliar to you, but go out there and put yourself out there in order to meet people. As a candidate, it seems to me you've got to run and run hard. You've got to start from dawn. It might be going to the bus station in the old days or the train station, to the evening coming to events such as this. And as you're thinking about running for office, I would just say volunteer in groups, certainly such as this. I think being involved in League of Women Voters, serving as an officer in the League of Women Voters gives you experience. I'm involved in a particular organization right now, and we have a great president, but he's having challenges in running the organization, and a few people have left, and he's a wonderful person, but he's not organized. He doesn't follow an agenda. He doesn't plan ahead and utilize his board or committee. So I think these are things that you learn over the years as you participate in groups. And I think from my own point of view, I see that at the national level with people who do have experience and understand how organization works and people that have no experience. So again, if you're thinking of running for office, get involved at any level in any organization. And again, thank you for having me here this evening.
Thank you, Steve. Our next speaker is former Senate President Therese Murray, also from Massachusetts. Former Massachusetts Senate President Therese Murray served for over 20 years in the Massachusetts Senate. And during her tenure, Senator Murray emphasized the importance of our healthcare industry, working on the original healthcare reform legislation and authoring 3 additional healthcare bills focused on cost containment, quality, and access to healthcare. As president of the Massachusetts Senate, Murray made international economic development a priority, seeking out partnerships and opportunities for Massachusetts companies and organizations to expand their reach. Seeing the importance of international economic development to the Massachusetts economy, Murray founded MassIgnite following her departure from the Massachusetts Senate. Her success in these international collaboration efforts have afforded her the opportunity to speak about economic development around the world, earning an honorary doctorate in health from the University of Plymouth, and that would be in the United Kingdom, not here. She has also received honorary doctorates from my alma mater, New England School of Law, and Suffolk University School of Law. In addition, Senator Murray has received honorary master's degree in public administration from the Mass Maritime Academy and Westfield State University. Through her work, Senator Murray has also received international recognition through the Medal of St. Olga from the Sokov region of Russia, and most recently, the 2014 Tip O'Neill Diaspora Award presented to her by the Irish President, Michael Higgins. Senator Murray currently serves on the boards of the Massachusetts Education International, Rasky Partners, and Florian Cares. Senator Murray.
I'm going to do a little different. Rather than personal, I'm going to talk to you about how to run for office. you have all talked a little about it in your personal experiences, but I'm going to give you an outline of how it really works. And for those of you who, and I apologize because I thought it was going to be women, I brought how women should run for office and a little primer, but men can look at it too because it talks about character and ethics and being prepared, all the things you've all talked about already. So why do people run? Or why do you want to run for public office? And there are several reasons people decide, including not being satisfied with the current representation, as Sheila pointed out, the belief that they can make some important contributions to society, and the desire to be in a position to help people. And that's really what energized me. So if you want to run for office, you have to be able to answer these questions. Why do you want to run? What issues are important to you? And we've heard a myriad of those. What's important to the people you want to represent? And why should voters choose you over the other candidates? Running for office every 2 years, and I'm going to talk about the legislature. The legislature runs every 2 years. And to even get on the ballot, as Larry said, candidates for state senate have to get 300 signatures of registered voters in their district, and candidates for representative have to get 150. And those have to be certified first by Larry's office and then by the Secretary of State's office. If there's more than one candidate from the same party, there has to be a primary to choose the one candidate that's going to represent that party. And during a primary, voters registered under a certain party may only vote on that particular ballot. Those who are unenrolled have to choose a party when they go in to vote in the primary if they're unenrolled. And once the primary is decided, the top candidate runs in the general election. Now, cost of elections, this is a big deal because things have changed greatly. My first election cost me $5,000. My last election cost me $350,000. And that's because social media changed, the way you reach people changed, the demographics change, and much more sophisticated looking at the people you want to reach. So you don't mail to everybody like you used to and sit down and have your cousins and your sisters stuff envelopes and lick the stamps for hours and hours and hours. Now it's all, these are the people who vote all the time. These are the super voters. Those are the people you want to get to. But you also want to let the other people know where you stand. So elections vary in cost. An average for a state Senate race costs $111,000 today. And a House race costs an average of $56,000. Statewide and federal races, as we know, cost millions and really billions because of all the PACs that put their own money in. If the candidate's an incumbent in a position of power, Senate President or Speaker of the House, the cost is much higher. That cost includes staff, signs, stickers, the old stuff, media buys, polling, palm cards, mailings. Each of those components are critical to the success of the campaign. And you have to have a field campaign, as Michelle stated. You have to have a strong field campaign. That has a major impact. And door-to-door doesn't go out of style. Door-to-door is important, that face-to-face contact. You might hate doing it, but it's more sophisticated. You actually get a list of the people on that street who actually vote, and who vote in municipal, or who vote in state, or who vote presidential. Those are the people you want to talk to first. Those are the people you want to make contact with. And the field helps you identify who's going to support you and who is not going to support you, and you can focus on who to sway and try to get their vote. IDing voters in general is done by canvassing. That's people knocking on doors, and calls to voters. Strongly support, sort of support, hate you. 1, 2, 3. IDing voters also allows you to better focus any direct mail pieces you're sending, so you're not wasting that money. Direct mail is also an important part of a campaign, and if possible, you should budget for a few pieces of mail. Depending on the mail in the universe, who you're mailing to, the cost will vary, but it's approximately $2,000 to $3,000 a mailing. Direct mail puts your name and your message directly in the voters' hands, and now you're seeing these oversized postcards, the bigger ones, so they don't get lost in the commercial mail that you're getting, and they stand out. Press and media, Dealing with the press has changed drastically in the past several years. Where news articles are earned media, used to be extremely critical in projecting a message, the explosion of social media has changed that and really diminished the overall importance of the traditional media. Social media is a double-edged sword. It allows you to directly communicate your message to constituents, but it also lends itself to rampant misinformation by outside sources that you have no control over. Where you would be able to correct misinformation in the past, social media makes those corrections virtually impossible. And because it can be somewhat anonymous, it lends itself to more personal attacks. And however, in order to win an election, utilizing all forms is really important, but you have to have somebody stay on top of what's coming in the comments sections, as we see in All Things Plymouth or in some of the other sites. There's some pretty negative people out there that, I used to say, when I would see some of the comments, somebody's sitting in their mother's basement, and this is their life, commenting on anything that goes on in a negative fashion. But the the personal contact is really important. The coffees, the volunteers, the organizations that you join, the community organizations are really important. You also have to be prepared for a PAC influence and mailings in opposition to you, and having people look at every aspect of your life. And you have to have a very thick skin because people will attack you. And for all the younger people out there who have these great websites and tweet and are on Facebook all the time, if you want to run for office, you better go back and scrub it. Because every picture you put up having a shot or a toast with your friends is out there and can be copied and used in any form or manner that people can take off and reproduce. So if you're going to run for office, be careful what you put up there on your social media sites. And why should you run for office? It's one of the most fulfilling careers you can have. When people have nowhere else to turn, they come and they talk to you, and hopefully you can help them. And you have the opportunity to change people's lives. I've had people in this town who I know never voted for me and don't support me, but came to me in times of the worst troubles in their lives and their families' lives, and I was able to help them. They didn't agree with my politics, but I still helped them. And it makes me feel good. I was driving into Boston this morning for an appointment, and I was stopped at a light, and my neighbor was with me. And unfortunately, I was driving and not in the passenger seat. There were two young people, clearly drug addicted, on the street, under a blanket in the freezing rain and the cold. And the young woman, was not in good shape. She was nodding. She was clearly sick. She was probably sick from needing some more dope. And it just breaks your heart to look at them. I just grabbed my wallet and called the guy over, and I said, take care of her, and then call the police and told them where they were. Those are things you can do at a much bigger level when you run for office and when you're a representative or a senator. Families call you, they can't get health care, they can't get coverage, the kid is addicted, or the family member has an addiction problem. You can get them in, you can get them a bed, and you can follow up with them, which we know here is extremely important with the problems we have, not just in this town, but in the state and across the country. You have the ability to really affect people and their well-being and their futures. And their children, lots of people. We were talking about special ed before this forum began tonight, and I talked about Mary Leone Cooper and how she advocated for her son in the Kingston school system, and she wrote a book. And I bought a case of those books and sent them out to the school, every one of my towns, so the SPED teachers could read that book and see how, and take a look at how she walked through the system and how it affected her and her child, who unfortunately is no longer with us. But he lived to the fullest abilities of his abilities while he was here. So if you want to run, if you think of running, run. We need you. Of course, I'm going to be a little prejudiced here and say we need more women in office. We really need more women, because when you have a seat at the table, you have a voice. And if you don't have a seat at the table, you don't have a voice. So thank you, League of Women Voters.
Well, and thank you, Senator Murray, for joining us this evening. Now, our final speaker is Bill Cohane. He grew up in downtown Plymouth. At an early age, he was already a political junkie. He was interested in campaign politics, holding signs and passing out campaign literature on his paper routes for McGovern, Carter, and Ted Kennedy. After studying abroad, Bill graduated from New England College with a BA degree in political science, which he put to good use ever since. Bill has worked as the political field organizer on presidential, gubernatorial, senatorial, and representative races throughout the Northeast and the Midwest. He also developed insight into the legislative side of politics when he worked in the office of Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan in Washington, D.C. Since he's returned to Plymouth, Bill has worked on campaigns to pass the Community Preservation Act, as well as a number of local campaigns. Currently, he serves as chairman of the Plymouth Democratic Town Committee, Precinct 3 Town Meeting member, Zoning Board of Appeals member, and chair of the Community Preservation Committee. And Bill will be sharing insights into the actual running of a campaign.
Good evening. I'd like to also thank the League of Women Voters for putting on a forum to have a discussion with the community about the political process, the campaign process. I do feel like it's around Thanksgiving and I'm down at the end of the table. The kid table.
Kids' table.
But there's been some great things that have been said tonight based on why you'd want to run for office. And that's a really important question to determine what is motivating you to get involved. And that's a great question that each presenter has touched on today. But what I want to touch on is the logistics of getting involved in a very local level. Because I think that's the struggle that we're having right now, not only locally, state, and nationally, candidates. And we're not seeing people get involved in the process as we once did. We're seeing enormous amounts of money being spent. Senate President Terry Murray has indicated the enormous cost to running for office. But here locally, we have a beautiful thing. It's called town meeting. Town meeting form of government does allow the average person in their backyard, raking their leaves, looking at the paper, talking about issues in their neighborhood, the ability to go out, go to Larry's office, get a paper and get 10 signatures, become a town meeting member. You can actually participate in the legislative process here in Plymouth on a very unique level. It's nearly 400 years old of democratic principles in action twice a year, every year at town meeting. And that's the most important thing that I can stress with people is that if you look at our state delegation, you'll see that Matt was a finance committee member, and Vinnie started out at town meeting, and you initially was the chairwoman of the Democratic Party here in Plymouth at one point. So everyone starts out at a very local level, and our focus has been recently looking at a neighborhood level, looking at the neighborhoods that make up our precincts. In this form of government that we have, town meeting, you have 15 different precincts. There's 9 members in each precinct. That makes up the legislative body of 135 people in this town. And they meet in the fall and they meet in the spring and they take up the town's warrant. The warrant is an announcement of what will be discussed at town meeting. Articles are placed on that warrant, and the discussion is about what each of these articles means to the town in terms of cost of services, in terms of quality of life here in Plymouth. So there is a discussion that takes place. And at a very early stage in your interest level, you have this opportunity to run for office for town meeting and serve in that capacity. You learn a great deal. I've been a member now for about 18 years. There's members there that have been there over 50. And these people participate in the process. They have a great deal of working knowledge of the town, but we need to change town meeting for the 21st century. We need more people to get involved, and I think that when someone sees an opportunity to get involved with not a great cost of money to run for town meeting, that's one step forward. If town meeting isn't something that you're looking for, you can participate on the numerous boards and committees that make up this form of government. Town meeting requires a great deal of volunteerism, people serving on the finance committee, people serving on the zoning board of appeals, running for planning board or school committee. There's over 325 people currently in the town of Plymouth serving on all these boards and committees. So if town meeting is something that you're not sure of, there's always the opportunity to serve on these committees. Each spring in June, the various boards appoint people. The Board of Selectmen will appoint people to various committees in the spring. There are advertisements, and you put your name in, and you go, and they appoint you. The same thing with the planning board. The planning board has appointments for people to involve themselves on local committees and boards. The moderator here appoints various committees and boards also. So if you're not looking to run for town meeting, there's another way you can participate locally. But town meeting does give you this opportunity to have your first taste of campaign politics. And it's a simple process, like I indicated. You're going into the town manager's office, you're getting your papers, you're getting your 10 signatures. You want to get a little bit more than 10 signatures, so some of them might not work out. Getting 20 is fine. You submit that to the clerk's office, and then you begin your campaign. Now, the nice thing is that you're running in one precinct. You have a precinct and you're running in. And there's a simple process of going to the clerk's office, and you pay $10 and you get a voter file for that precinct. And as it's been indicated before, you want to zero in on people in your precinct that are registered to vote, that are high-performing voters. So what you do is you can look at the last 3 town elections in 2016, 15, and 14, and you can see who's consistently coming out to vote. It's a very interesting way of targeting people in your precinct. Not only targeting them with a piece of mail, but targeting them door to door. That's another critical thing that people need to do, is to get out into your community, knock on doors, and provide information of why you're running, but more importantly, listening to the voters, because you can learn a great deal from the people that you solicitate for a vote. They'll have concerns and you listen. I really truly believe the campaign process changes people. You become educated on the needs of the public. It's like osmosis. By listening to people, you start to hear and you start to understand how you can be more effective on a level like that at town meeting or even a board of committee. So I believe that, you know, if you look here locally and you look state and you look nationally, there is a issue of finding people that are qualified to run in the capacity of working on a political party as a chairperson of a town committee. And I'm sure, and I've had these conversations with the Republican town committee, it's the same thing, and that is trying to find candidates to run in the process that you need to get them to be involved. I think everyone is kind of focused now in recent months that there has been a surge in energy in the community to be more involved and trying to give people opportunities to be effective on that level. And one of those things is advocating people to get on the boards, get on the committees, think about running for town meeting. This past spring, there was a community outreach opportunity to identify precincts and find people to run, and people ran and were elected. We have a number of new people at town meeting. For the first time, they've put their name in and they have campaigned, and it's great to see some of the younger people campaign because they're basing it on social media, they're basing it on different ways of communicating, but it's interesting, they don't have this understanding of the old school campaigning that you still have to do. Even though there's Facebook and there's tweeting, there's still the knocking on the door, there's still the IDing of the voter, it's still communicating with voters and capturing that information so that on election day you can go back and call those people and get them out. There's some things that have kind of drifted away in national and state politics, and that is it's really hard to get a political piece out to somebody because you're going through your mail and you're throwing that away so quick. When the phone rings and you hear somebody running for Congress or president or robocall, you want to hang up. But people are starved for information locally. Here in Plymouth, people really want to know what's going on. And when you produce a campaign piece in Plymouth, like I said before, you're going to get the voter files. You're going to find the high-performing voters by year, and there's a simple process of a program that you run that dedupes the list down. It takes the list from about 3,000 to 4,000 people per precinct, and it takes it down to 400 or 500 people that are participating in that election for town elections. You can target those 400 people. And what you want to do is produce something that they recognize, a familiar picture of Plymouth or a familiar picture in that precinct. If you're running in Precinct 8, you probably want to have a picture of Geller's behind you and the issues that you feel that are important. Because when you get that piece of mail and you're like, wait a second, isn't that Geller's or isn't that the waterfront? You'll stop for a minute because it's about Plymouth. It's the same thing about making phone calls. It's really hard to make phone calls these days because people hang up. But if you can get on the phone and they quickly announce that you're calling from Plymouth and you're talking about Plymouth issues and voting information, you might get them to hang on for a little bit. Because when it becomes a local issue, people are very, very interested. It's, Tip O'Neill said it many times, all politics is local, but the strength of campaigning locally is the passion that people have for their neighborhood issues, their precinct issues, and their town issues. People take those very seriously, and that is what you want to focus your attention on. But it can be a lot of, like I said before, it can be a lot of fun campaigning. It can be very rewarding to be taking part in the political process. We have a very unique thing here in Plymouth and across the country, and it's democracy, and it will only survive if people participate. And that energy that people bring to that effort is going to get us through some pretty tough times. But I can't advocate enough that you should consider getting on a board or committee in this town. It's unique where you can participate and have a great effect. And the same thing when it comes to town meeting. You can run for town meeting and play a role. I've been very, very lucky to grow up in a town and be able to serve in the capacity of a volunteer. You can't underestimate the effectiveness of activism in the individual getting involved at a local level. You don't have to be congressman or president or senate or great office. You can get a lot done on the local level, being an activist, advocating for issues, and supporting people that are running for office, that are doing enormous work. No one person can do anything alone. So there's the third component of campaign politics. It's not only running for office or serving on a committee, but it's being that activist and advocating and supporting people who are out there that are doing good work. So it's an exciting time, and it's an exciting opportunity to get involved on a local level. And again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting a forum like this. I think it's important that we begin reaching out and educating people about how they can participate and be effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And could we please have a round of applause for all of our participants? They were wonderful. I do want to thank all of you for volunteering and agreeing to share your knowledge and your experience in running for office. A strong democracy depends on engaged citizens and dedicated, competent leaders willing to step forward and serve in public office. No matter which public office, school committee, town boards, or state offices, our public institutions become stronger when interested candidates offer voters choices as to who will represent them. By running for public office, you help sustain the democracy envisioned by our country's founders. Our systems work because of people like you who had the courage and determination to run for and to hold public office. The Plymouth Area League of Women Voters is dedicated to voter education and support. We can always use your enthusiasm for the political process in our organization. We hope that anybody who's listening and anyone who's here will consider membership in our organization, which, by the way, is not restricted solely to women, to work for an educated and committed electorate in both local and state elections. Again, thank you for coming. Thank you for all of our listeners, and good night.